On the evening of May the 11th, 2023, a 20-year-old woman did not answer her door. Early that day, she had confirmed plans to meet friends at her apartment pool in Midland, Texas, at approximately 6 p.m. One of those friends arrived and began knocking. There was no response. When she pressed lightly against the door, she could see a thin crack of light from inside the apartment. Assuming her friend might just be asleep or in the shower, she left briefly to get food. At around 8 p.m, she then returned with another friend. This time, the light that had been visible earlier was no longer on. Repeated phone calls now went unanswered. Concern growing, they contacted the woman's brother. Before 11 p.m, the apartment manager unlocked the door so that the friends could check on her. Inside, her phone was found between the couch cushions. Also in the apartment was her purse and her car keys. Her vehicle was still parked outside in the lot. Her dog had been left alone without food or water. Very strangely, a black coffee table that normally sat in the living room was now missing. And, near the entryway, a mop and bucket of dirty water were sitting on the floor. The floor itself felt unusually sticky underfoot, but even with these clues, there were no obvious signs explaining where the woman had gone. There was no clear indication that she had packed or planned to leave. If her phone, keys and car were all still there, then how or why would she have left the apartment? And if she did not leave voluntarily, then who else could have had access to that locked door? In this video, I will share with you 7 documented facts that make this case truly disturbing. The woman who lived in that apartment was 20-year-old Madeline Melina Pantoja. She lived at Palladium Museum Place Apartments at 1711 West Francis Avenue in Midland, Texas. Madeline worked as a bartender at a local restaurant. She was described as 5 foot 4 inches tall and approximately 130 pounds with brown hair. She had a butterfly tattoo behind her ear and a snake with a rose tattoo on her arm. On May the 9th, 2023 at approximately 11 p.m, a friend dropped Madeline off at her apartment. This was the last confirmed time that she was seen alive by someone in person. The following evening on May the 10th, events can be narrowed down into a small window. At 8:35 p.m, Madeline's brother spoke with her on the phone. He later told investigators that his sister sounded upset. The reason for her distress was apparently an argument that she had had earlier that evening. At 8:37 p.m, her brother sent a follow-up text message, but Madeline did not respond. However, at 9:31 p.m, she did send a text message to a friend, confirming their plans to meet at her apartment pool the next day. That message would become the final outgoing communication from Madeline's phone. After that point, there were no additional confirmed responses from her. From an investigative standpoint, this timestamp really matters. When detectives analyze disappearances, they work outwards from the final verified communication. So that 9:31 p.m. message, it establishes that Madeline was alive, and she was actively making plans at that time for the next day. It also establishes that whatever occurred afterwards happened within a now narrowing window, the window between the final message and when her friend showed up the next day. Madeline's daily routine, according to friends, included frequent communication and checking in regularly with everyone. So when someone who routinely responds within minutes, then suddenly stops communicating entirely, investigators treat that shift in behavior as significant. The next confirmed activity tied to the case would not come from Madeline's phone. It would come from the early morning hours of May the 11th. Before sunrise, something occurred in or around that apartment complex that would later become central to the investigation. Yet at that point, nobody understood that they were already inside that critical window. In missing person investigations, the hours immediately following the final confirmed communications are often the most important. That confirmed point was 9:31 p.m. on May the 10th. However, investigators would later focus heavily on the period between midnight and dawn. At approximately 1:30 a.m. on May the 11th, a neighbour who lived beneath Madeleine's apartment reported waking up to loud yelling. She described hearing both a male and female voice. She also reported hearing a woman scream. The neighbour stated that arguments were not uncommon in that apartment, and that she had just learned to usually tune them out. However, she specifically described the scream on that night as sounding like one made out of fear rather than anger. When officers document statements like this, they log them as another potential time anchor. Even if the witness cannot identify individuals, the timestamp may help narrow down investigative focus. Around that same early morning period, a digital footprint also began to grow. At 12:26 a.m., traffic and surveillance cameras began capturing a pickup truck that was travelling in a direction of Madeleine's apartment complex. At 1:59 a.m., a security camera near an oil company off Montgomery Street recorded a pickup truck in the area. The vehicle visible in that footage had two different coloured rims on the passenger side. Distinct vehicle features like mismatched rims are important because they reduce ambiguity when reviewing low-resolution footage. It makes a truck stand out and easier to spot. At 3:22 a.m., a flock license plate reader camera captured the vehicle's license plate near South County Road 1160. Flock systems automatically log plate numbers, timestamps and geolocation data, allowing investigators to reconstruct travel routes after the fact. Additional camera data showed that between approximately 12:26 a.m. and 3:37 a.m., that vehicle travelled from a residential apartment complex and then later returned to that same residence. This matters for two reasons. Firstly, it places a specific vehicle in proximity to the apartment during the same window in which neighbours reported yelling and screaming. And secondly, it can contradict any claim that that vehicle remained stationary overnight. At this stage of the investigation, officers were not working with anything solid. They were just organising timestamps. They had the final outgoing message at 9:31. They had a reported scream at approximately 1:30 a.m. They had a truck captured on cameras between 12:26 a.m. and 3:37 a.m. The question investigators now faced was pretty simple. Who was driving that vehicle during those early morning hours? And how did those movements connect to what was later found inside the apartment? At this point, the identity of the vehicle's owner had not yet been publicly revealed, but internally, detectives were already beginning to line up the timeline against other statements that they had been given. Even if digital data conflicts with a verbal account, it doesn't mean that any of that evidence should be discounted. Instead, it means it should be tested, and that testing process by investigators would soon expand far beyond cameras and deep into phone records. At 11:02 p.m. on May the 11th, officers with the Midland Police Department were dispatched in order to conduct a welfare check at Madeleine's apartment. By the time officers arrived at 11:13 p.m., family members had already expressed concern that Madeleine's personal belongings were still inside the unit. When patrol officers respond to a welfare check involving an adult, the initial purpose is simple. They just want to confirm whether the individual is present and safe, or otherwise. However, when officers investigate conditions that suggest possible criminal activity, the situation swings immediately from welfare verification onto evidence preservation. Inside the apartment, officers observed a mop and bucket of dirty water positioned near the entryway. They also noted that the flooring felt unusually sticky underfoot. This was consistent with a heavy cleaning solution having been recently used. Kind of ironically, excess cleaning product can leave residue when an area is scrubbed aggressively, but not rinsed afterwards. In cases involving potential violence, signs of recent cleaning are documented carefully, because they may indicate an attempt to alter or remove evidence. At the point of these findings, a detective was notified. Madeleine's case then transitioned from a routine welfare check into a suspicious disappearance investigation. The following morning at approximately 10:50 a.m. on May the 12th, officers received another call, reporting a woman's voice that had been heard inside the apartment, and given the prior concerns, officers made entry again to verify whether Madeleine was present. During the second entry, additional details were observed. There was a hole in the bathroom door. There was also a hole in the bedroom door, and there was also hair found attached to the damaged area. Hair being attached to impact damage is significant because it suggests contact that occurred during a forceful movement or impact. Officers also noted that the comforter from the bed was missing, and a dark red stain was visible on the bedsheet. When officers encounter staining consistent with possible red DNA, they must document, photograph, and collect that sample. Each item must be logged, bagged, and preserved to maintain the chain of custody. The presence of the damage to the doors, and the possible red DNA staining, along with the signs of cleaning, all of this collectively changes the classification of the case. Detectives formally determined that foul play had occurred inside Madeleine's apartment. This kind of determination is not made lightly. It requires actual evidence to suggest that an act dangerous to human life may have taken place. The race was now on to hopefully find Madeleine alive and well. Discovering who had access to a location becomes extremely important when there are no signs of forced entry into a home, and in this case, the apartment had been locked. There was no indication of forced entry. That narrowed the field significantly. Detectives now had 3 parallel tracks. They had a specific overnight window tied to a reported scream. They had the vehicle moving during that same time frame, and they had physical indicators from inside the home, suggesting an attack, followed by a cleanup. When those 3 tracks intersect, investigators begin focusing on consistencies between them. So in this case, who had access to the apartment, who was in the area during that critical window, and who lined up to digital records. At this stage, publicly, very little information was being shared. But sadly, internally, the investigation was no longer about a missing person. It had become a homicide investigation. Detectives would now move on to cell data, because tracking vehicles relies on cameras, but what happens when there are no cameras on that vehicle? Phones, however, they track and map a lot more. Data from the right phone can narrow a search zone from miles to meters. Once detectives determined that foul play had likely occurred inside the apartment, the investigation expanded beyond the immediate scene. The next important thing was to determine where Madeleine had been taken. On May the 13th, investigators obtained a warrant for cell phone records associated with a specific AT&T number. When law enforcement seeks phone records in a violent crime investigation, they request call logs, tower connections, and geolocation data where available. Unlike just GPS tracking, cell phone geolocation works by measuring which towers a device connects to, and then estimates proximity based on signal strength and times. Those records, though, are not always immediate. Investigators must wait for the provider to produce responsive data.
These efforts include the enlistment of assistance from members of the Midland County Sheriff's Office, Texas Rangers, Federal Bureau of Investigation, and Department of Homeland Security investigations. The search of approximately 60 square miles of remote property using human assets, drones, and manned aircraft. The execution of over 12 search warrants related to both tangible property and technological data. Interview of approximately 25 individuals thus far. Follow-up investigation of approximately 20 tips derived from Crime Stoppers, as well as call-ins to the Midland Police Department. Although we have identified no threat of danger to the general public at this time, as already mentioned by the mayor, and the investigation continues to be classified as a missing person search, please be assured that should evidence suggest foul play, criminal enforcement actions will be taken without delay.
While they were waiting for that data, search teams were deployed across Midland County. Law enforcement later confirmed that approximately 60 square miles of remote property were searched. Ground teams, drones, and manned aircraft were used. More than a dozen search warrants were executed during that period. Over 25 individuals were interviewed. More than 20 tips were followed up. Large-scale rural searches like this require intense planning. Teams divide the land into segments and then systematically clear each one of those segments to avoid wasting time or missing a single square inch of land. But even with coordinated efforts, 60 square miles represents a vast amount of terrain.
Madeline Pantoja has been missing for a week now. Her keys, phone, purse, and dog were all left in her apartment, and the search for her continues. Another prayer service was held for her tonight. Tyler Dupnick with us now on the latest, and Tyler, loved ones really banding together and trying to get their hopes up to find out where she is.
Yeah, that's right, Alex. A very emotional night. It's for the third straight night they came together to pray for Madeline. Now, they recited the rosary this evening at Our Lady of Guadalupe Shrine and Parish in Midland, and the plan is to continue to pray for Madeline until she is found. As the rosary was recited Wednesday evening by loved ones of Madeline Pantoja, a powerful call to God is made in the hope of finding her.
We're just very desperate. We're just begging God to help us get her back home. We're just doing whatever we can to just get the most help we can from anywhere.
At this point, we need God. We need him to guide us through this, to guide the police through this. We need help because it's been 6 days, 7 days.
7 days.
Like, we can't keep waiting.
Ramos and Hernandez say hope is the only thing left to hold on to. The last week has felt constant for them as they try and find their best friend.
The days have just been
All mushed together, honestly.
because we've just been doing the same thing. We've just been reaching out to whoever we can reach out to, looking in the lands, fields, and everywhere we can look for her.
It's like the best word right now is just heartbroken because
Yeah.
we feel hopeless. There's nothing that we can do. It's like it's out of our hands, and we searched everywhere.
We passed out flyers everywhere.
With prayers set to continue, their efforts will remain as well.
If you're watching this, Maddie, just be strong. We're coming to get you, and we're trying our hardest to find you. Just stay strong, and we will stay strong too.
We just hope that you're safe and you're alive, and that at the end of this, you're at the end of this. You're the light at the end of the tunnel after all of this, and we won't stop searching.
Ever.
Then, in the early morning hours of May the 20th, the requested cell records were received. Investigators then sent those records to a Texas Ranger for geolocation mapping. The mapped data focused on the period between May the 10th and May the 12th. Upon reviewing the plotted coordinates, detectives identified an approximate 1 mile area of interest near East County Road 190 and South County Road 1138. This was now their priority search area. There was no guarantee of a result, but it's a good place to start. Resources were redirected accordingly, and a search was conducted within that 1 mile radius. During that search, remains were discovered. Detectives on scene compared jewelry found with the remains to items that Madeline was known to wear. Based on that comparison, investigators identified the remains as Madeline Melina Pantoja. She was then transported to the Dallas County Medical Examiner's Office, and an autopsy and formal identification was carried out. At that moment, the investigation shifted from locating a missing person to now having a confirmed homicide victim. A source close to the investigation later stated that Madeline's remains were found inside that black coffee table, the one that was missing from her apartment.
Loved ones placed flowers near a memorial for her, and the ceremony concluded with a balloon release. Baby pink was a color Madeline loved, and that was one of many ways she was represented last night.
I think it was just a way of showing her, showing how much she touched everybody's hearts. It was a way to celebrate her even though she's no longer here with us. It was a way to show us how much we love her and will continue loving her throughout eternal life.
Benavidez said that Madeline deserved a gathering like this and spoke on the kind of person she was.
It was always her smile, her endless laughs. She could be serious for 5 minutes and she would just end up making everybody laugh. She was just a sweet soul. She was so loving. She would take 5 minutes out of her day to be there for absolutely anybody that needed it. And I know that she still would have continued to do that if she were still here with us.
Now, Benavidez told me that they were grateful for the support that came out last night during what was an emotional evening. She also mentioned in our conversation that they were grateful for the time that they spent with Madeline. Her burial service will take place this morning at 11, and a memorial mass will be held tomorrow morning at 9.
Now investigators could return to the timeline with a new clarity. They had the apartment where foul play was determined. They had a vehicle moving during that overnight window. They had cell data placing a device within a remote 1-mile search zone where remains were ultimately located. They had also established that Madeleine's apartment had been locked with no signs of forced entry. Access now became the central question. So, who had a key to that apartment? Who was it that was present during the argument on May the 10th? Who owned that vehicle with the mismatched rims? The vehicle that was captured during the early morning hours? And whose cell phone data was it that mapped directly to the field where Madeleine was found? That convergence led investigators to one man. Investigators identified the man as 24-year-old Mario Juan Chacon Jr. Mario had been in a relationship with Madeleine prior to her disappearance. According to family and friends though, the couple had recently broken up. Mario had previously lived at the same apartment complex, and he did still have access to Madeleine's unit from their time together. In fact, multiple witnesses confirmed that he did possess a key to her apartment. On May the 10th, the evening before Madeleine was reported missing, Mario contacted her brother. During that call, he stated that he and Madeleine had argued and that she was now not answering his calls. Later that night, when friends and family were unable to reach Madeleine, Mario told them that he had been at his own home all day. He stated that family members could verify his location. At 9:26 p.m. on May the 11th, he even sent his location to Madeleine's brother, showing that he was at home. Mario also owned a 2012 Ford F-250 pickup truck. Surveillance footage from the early morning hours of May the 11th showed that pickup truck with 2 different coloured rims, and it was near Madeleine's apartment. Investigators later determined that that vehicle did belong to Mario. Traffic cameras, business surveillance systems, and a flock license plate reader placed that truck travelling between his home and Madeleine's apartment complex during that window. When interviewed by law enforcement in the early morning hours of May the 12th, Mario stated that the last time he physically saw Madeleine was May the 9th. He also stated that his last communications with her was around 9 p.m. on May the 10th. During a later interview on May the 12th, he said that he had gone to the apartment complex, but that was in order to drop off a cousin who also lived there. On May the 12th, after detectives informed him of inconsistencies in his timeline, Mario then ended the interview and he declined a polygraph test. By the time the cell phone data was mapped to the field where Madeleine was found, investigators had already aligned vehicle movement, phone data, and the person that had access to Madeleine's apartment to just one person, and that person was indeed Mario. At approximately 3:30 p.m. on May the 20th, the same day that the remains were discovered, Mario was taken into custody and he was charged with murder. The investigative phase had now transitioned into the legal phase, and what would follow would involve indictments, motions, and their own drama. When Mario Juan Chacon Jr. was arrested on May the 20th, 2023, the charge filed was murder under Texas Penal Code 1902. That statute covers intentional or knowing acts that cause the ending of another individual, as well as acts clearly dangerous to human life that do result in an ending. His bond was set at $3 million. A high bond amount typically reflects the seriousness of the charge, as well as the perceived risk factors considered by the court. On July the 19th, 2023, a Midland County grand jury returned an indictment, charging Mario with 1 count of murder. An indictment, though, does not determine guilt. It just says that there's probable cause, and it then moves to trial. The indictment said that Mario did this on purpose, and that he used multiple forms of physical assault. These included striking and pressure to the neck. The language included in the indictment references to both hands and unknown instruments being used. Mario's defense now filed several motions. A motion to quash the indictment argued that the charging language was too broad. The courts, however, denied that motion.
Yeah, Jay and Mary Kate, family, friends, and concerned citizens all made their way to the Midland County Courthouse earlier today to voice their concerns over Madeline Pantoja and Mario Chacon Jr. Over the last month, West Texans have been coming out and expressing their emotions and have been the voice for Madeline. We are Madeline! And today was no different. Over 100 people were here today to make it clear that they oppose any bond reduction for Mario Chacon, whose bond was set for $3 million after being arrested for the murder of Madeline. During the hearing today, the prosecution called Chacon's mother to the stand, where they talked about the background of her son and their family ties to Mexico, where both the mother and father of Mario Chacon Jr. are originally from. The defense asked for the bond to be lowered to $750,000 and to let Chacon's bond out through the Midland County pretrial program.
Would also require that other conditions be imposed on the case. You'd have to report once or twice a month, maybe even weekly, have a curfew, even a GPS monitor. But we were most agreeable with those conditions in this case.
The prosecution then asked the mother of Mario Chacon questions, including whether or not she would co-sign for the bond and what type of assets the family has. She responded that they have the house, the cars, and an 18-wheeler. Despite the mother of Chacon testifying that they have assets, the family of Madeline Pantoja continued to voice their disapproval of any bond reduction.
Pray and hope that the judge touches his heart and sees our pain, that he sees everything he put our family through, and he doesn't give him that reduction.
The defense also sought a reduction in bond. That request was also denied. A motion for change of venue was filed, asserting that the pretrial publicity and public demonstrations could prevent a fair trial in Midland County. That motion was also denied. Multiple trial dates were scheduled over the following 2 years. Some were rescheduled or delayed, but throughout that period, Mario remained in custody. Eventually though, rather than proceeding to a jury trial, Mario finally entered a guilty plea. He pleaded guilty to murder. He also pleaded guilty to tampering with evidence. The court then sentenced him to 35 years for murder and 20 years for tampering with evidence. The sentences were ordered to run concurrently, meaning they would be served at the same time, rather than consecutively, one after the other. I really hate this, by the way. It just makes no sense to me whatsoever. Mario also received credit for time served beginning from his 2023 arrest. Under Texas law, he must now serve half of the 35-year sentence, before then becoming eligible for parole consideration. Parole eligibility, though, it doesn't guarantee that he will be released at that time. All it means is that the case can be reviewed. For Madeline's family, legally, it meant that this was over. For investigators, to all intents and purposes, it meant that they had won. At the time that she met her end, Madeline was 20 years old. She left behind a family, friends, and a community that spent 10 days searching fields and roads before their nightmare then became their reality.
Stuffed inside a suitcase, hands and feet bound, dumped on the side of Glenville Road.
My daughter did not deserve whatever you did to her. My daughter was pure.
When a monster comes and takes your daughter away or your child away, for what? For what? You know, it's not only hurt, it's hate.
In the late hours of January the 28th, 2019, Valerie Reyes was awake in her basement apartment in New Rochelle, New York. She had just told her mother something that would haunt the family forever. She said that she was afraid someone was going to get her. She did not say who. She did not explain why. She only said that she was scared. That same night, miles away in Flushing, Queens, a man was also awake. Security cameras would later show him leaving his home close to midnight. He was dressed in dark clothing. He was carrying nothing unusual. He was alone. At that moment, nobody knew that these two timelines were actually moving towards each other, converging in a nightmare. Valerie's fears were not reported to the police. The man's movements did not raise suspicions. There was nothing on the surface that seemed to demand intervention. But within hours, Valerie would vanish. And within just days, investigators would be forced to piece together 2 separate nights as one single chain of events. In this video, I will share with you 9 unbelievable details that makes this case truly disturbing. Valerie Reyes was 24. She rented a small basement apartment on Colonial Place. She worked as a sales associate at the Barnes & Noble store in Eastchester. Co-workers described her as reliable and well-liked. Her family described her as gentle, creative, and deeply compassionate. Valerie loved drawing and portrait art. She had ambitions of becoming a tattoo artist. One of her brothers was learning to tattoo, and Valerie even allowed him to practice his designs on her. And that level of trust spoke volumes. Because Valerie was close with her family, she spoke regularly with her parents and her siblings. Sundays were often reserved for family time. Those routines were consistent enough that deviations were immediately noticeable to everyone. Valerie also lived with anxiety and depression. Those struggles were not hidden from her family. The situation was manageable. But what made late January of 2019 different was the intensity of her fears and anxieties. On January the 28th, Valerie told her mother that she was experiencing anxiety attacks. She said that she felt paranoid. She said that she was afraid that somebody was going to end her. From an investigative standpoint, statements like that were important because they established a state of mind. It could mean that her fears were based on evidence. At the time though, there was no actionable information. Valerie did not name a person. She did not describe a threat. She was not overtly asking for help or protection. Later that night, Valerie spoke with her best friend, Jeffrey Anderson. The conversation focused on her anxiety, but it didn't seem to give many clues as to what would happen next. There was no indication that she planned to leave town, nor any indication that she was planning to meet anyone. Her last known phone call ended at around 11:30 p.m. From a timeline perspective, that moment becomes a real reference point. Everything after it must be reconstructed without Valerie. Within just hours, Valerie would stop responding entirely. At the time, nobody knew that this would be the last ordinary night of her life. On February the 5th, 2019, highway workers were conducting a routine sweep in Greenwich, Connecticut. The area was along Glenville Road, about 15 to 20 feet from the roadway. They noticed a red suitcase in a wooded area. This suitcase obviously did not belong there. One of the workers approached it and opened it. Emergency services were then contacted immediately. When police arrived, they confirmed that a woman's body was inside the case. Her hands and feet were bound. Packing tape was wrapped around her mouth and chin. She was barefoot. Due to the winter temperatures, her body was partially frozen. Investigators secured the area and they began documenting the scene. Because the body was found in Connecticut, the case initially fell under Connecticut jurisdiction. However, a missing persons report had originated in New York. This interstate split triggered federal involvement. The Connecticut medical examiner later determined that the cause of demise was homicidal asphyxiation. The victim was identified as Valerie Reyes. The investigation shifted rapidly. What had been a simple disappearance was now a confirmed homicide. The location that she was found answered one question, but it raised many more.
Chris and Mary, it's been an emotional time for loved ones who were holding on to hope after Valerie Reyes went missing, only to learn about a week later that she wouldn't be returning home. And now many in this community are hoping for justice as police continue the relentless search for those responsible. Friends and family gathered in this time of grief at a candlelight vigil at Glen Island Park last night, together mourning the loss of 24-year-old Valerie Reyes. Friends describe her as sweet and loving. On January 29th, Reyes didn't show up for work at an Eastchester Barnes & Noble. She also couldn't be found in her basement apartment in New Rochelle. A week later on Tuesday, a gruesome discovery was made in Greenwich, Connecticut. Reyes's body was found stuffed inside a suitcase, hands and feet bound, dumped on the side of Glenville Road.
I was praying that wasn't her in the suitcase. I was praying her family would have her back. She's the oldest sibling. What it is to lose your firstborn, I wouldn't be able to live with myself.
I just hope they catch whoever did it so this doesn't happen again. It's tough.
Police are trying to get to the bottom of this, reconstructing the victim's movements since she went missing. She may have spent time in Manhattan. Sources say Reyes was feeling anxious after breaking up with a boyfriend. Now, an autopsy is complete, but authorities have not released the cause of death. They say they've gotten a multitude of tips and ask you continue to bring in any information you may have. We're live in New Rochelle. Jenna DeAngelis, CBS 2 News.
All right, Jenna, thank you so much.
Once Valerie Reyes was identified, investigators began working backwards from the evidence trail. ATM footage was reviewed frame by frame. The vehicle seen near the bank was traced to a rental company in Flushing, Queens. Rental records showed that the black Honda had been rented out during the exact window of Valerie's disappearance. The individual who rented the vehicle was questioned. That person was ruled out. However, the rental agreement listed additional authorized drivers. One of those names was Javier Enrique da Silva Rojas. Javier da Silva was also 24 years old in January of 2019. He lived in a condominium in Flushing, Queens. He was originally from Venezuela, and he also had Portuguese citizenship. He studied journalism at a Catholic university in Caracas. Caracas is the capital city of Venezuela, by the way. And whilst I'm on a quick tangent, I just want to say if you can hear a kind of tapping or clicking noise at all in this video. Can you hear that? I don't know. There's a bird that's moved into my roof and I don't really know what to do. So I think it's making a nest or destroying a house. I don't know. On with the case. In 2017, Javier travelled to the United States under a visa waiver program. That program allowed him to stay for a limited period. When that time expired though, he did not leave. This means that by early 2019, Javier was in the United States unlawfully. In New York, Javier worked a series of ordinary jobs. He was employed by a cleaning company. Later, he worked as a barista at a coffee shop. To those around him, he just appeared normal and stable. On social media, he presented himself as thoughtful and artistic. His accounts were filled with travel photos, city scenes, and images of nature. Friends and acquaintances described him as kind and helpful. Some said that he had gone out of his way to assist others when they were struggling. From the outside, there was nothing unusual about Javier, apart from overstaying his visa. There was also no known criminal history, again apart from the visa thing. And there was nothing really that stood out about him at all. People who blend in rarely draw immediate attention in any situation, but personal perception and private behaviour are not the same thing. Later, detectives would learn that at least one person viewed Javier in a very different way. Valerie's own mother, she did not trust him. She described him as controlling and manipulative during the time that Javier was in a relationship with Valerie. Those concerns though were not documented officially at the time. They would only start to gain weight after Valerie disappeared.
We had hope that she would come back. From what we last knew, she was in the city. And that's all we knew, that she was in the city, so we thought she was looking for help. My daughter did not deserve whatever you did to her. My daughter was pure. Everyone that met Valerie loved her. These past few days I've been getting messages from people that met Valerie, that worked with Valerie. And they all told me what a wonderful person she has been to them. Sooner or later he will get caught. I know it.
Valerie Reyes and Javier da Silva met in 2018 through a dating app. They dated for approximately 3 months. The relationship, though, did not progress the way that Javier had wanted it to. In April of 2018, Valerie made the decision to end the relationship. From her perspective, it was done, it was over. From Javier's perspective, though, it was not. After the breakup, he continued to attempt contact. Valerie was not reciprocating. In fact, she blocked him on social media, and she avoided all direct communication. When Javier reached out again, Valerie insisted that any contact they may have must go through friends first. In September of 2018, Javier contacted Valerie. claiming he had accidentally used her debit card. He said that he wanted to reimburse her. Valerie once again refused to engage with him directly. She told friends that she did not want any contact. After this point, it appeared that communication stopped altogether. So on paper, this relationship was history, it was forgotten. By January of 2019, nearly 9 months had passed since the breakup. Investigatively speaking, former short-time partners from that far back are often deprioritized. More recent relationships usually receive attention first. At the time that Valerie vanished, she had in fact recently ended a different relationship. That breakup had occurred just days earlier. So from a procedural standpoint, that fact initially carried more weight. Javier was not immediately treated as a primary suspect. There was no active disputes. There was no known recent contact. There was no outward sign that he was still involved in Valerie's life. But would that assumption last? Okay, update, I just banged on the ceiling and the bird stopped pecking, so maybe some peace and quiet. Let's see. On February the 6th, one day after Valerie's body was discovered, Javier then returned to the rental company. He re-rented that same black Honda. Location data from his phone showed a concentrated cluster of signals at a car wash in the Bronx. He then returned the vehicle once again. This was obviously suspicious. People do not typically rent a vehicle solely to clean it before returning it. That behavior suggested an attempt to remove trace evidence. On February the 11th, 2019, Javier was arrested in Flushing, Queens. The arrest was made on financial charges that could be immediately supported. This allowed investigators to search his residence. Inside his wallet, officers found Valerie's debit card. They also found her driver's license. Javier initially offered false explanations. He claimed that he had found Valerie's wallet. He claimed that he had not seen her in over a year. Digital records, though, they contradicted his claims. On the evening of January the 28th, 2019, Javier de Silva rented a black Honda from a garage in Flushing, Queens. That rental was logged under a short window of time. At approximately 10:50 p.m., security cameras then captured Javier leaving his residence. He was dressed in dark clothing. He was wearing black Adidas sneakers with white soles. He got into the rental vehicle alone. Rental records like this often become critical in missing persons cases, especially if it's not something that the person would normally do. It does a few other things as well. It establishes the fact that a suspect is now mobile, and it can also give a precise window of time. It's this narrow window that investigators can then test against other data. So, Javier drove out of Queens towards Westchester County. In the early hours of January the 29th, his phone location data placed him in New Rochelle. More specifically, it placed him within roughly 200 feet of Valerie Reyes' apartment. Shortly after arriving in that area, Javier then switched his phone to airplane mode. And if you didn't know, that action stopped location tracking and data transmission. It kind of makes you digitally invisible. It's unlikely that someone would disable their digital footprint during just an ordinary visit. So, at this point, things aren't looking too good for Javier. He then entered Valerie's apartment. There is no evidence that anyone else was there. So, as far as we know, it was Javier and Valerie in her apartment alone. And from that point forward, Valerie Reyes was never seen by anyone else again.
A funeral is being held today in New Rochelle for the woman whose body was found stuffed in a suitcase on the side of a road in Greenwich, Connecticut. Family and friends gathered at St. Gabriel's Church to say goodbye to 24-year-old Valerie Reyes. Her ex-boyfriend is under arrest and charged with her murder. Sources say Javier de Silva of Flushing, Queens, told police he killed Reyes at her home a week ago. They briefly dated last year until Reyes broke up with him.
Inside the apartment, a violent altercation occurred. Valerie suffered multiple injuries to her head and face. These included bruising, fractures, and a large hematoma on her forehead. The pattern of injuries indicated repeated force. Small amounts of red DNA were later found in the apartment. Stains were also located on the bathroom floor, with another on the toilet. The relatively limited quantity of this red DNA suggested that the scene had been partially cleaned or otherwise covered whilst what happened. At some point after the attack, Valerie was then restrained. Her hands were bound with packing tape and twine. Her feet were bound the same way. Multiple layers of packing tape were wrapped over her mouth. So Valerie was now completely incapacitated. Anything that happened from that point forwards, she had no control over. Valerie was then placed in a red suitcase. She was still alive when this happened. Forensic findings later confirmed this. That red suitcase did belong to Valerie. It was not something that the perpetrator brought in from outside. So this may suggest that what happened was not planned. After Valerie was placed in the suitcase, she was removed from the apartment. With the real damage already done, the perpetrator's next moves would determine just how far they were willing to go. Still, at this point, to the outside world, Valerie had simply stopped answering her phone. In the hours after Valerie was removed from her apartment, financial activity began appearing on her accounts. At approximately 5 a.m. on January the 29th, her debit card was used at an ATM in New Rochelle. $1,000 was withdrawn. ATM surveillance footage captured a hooded individual wearing dark clothing. The person arrived alone and left immediately after the withdrawal. This financial activity becomes another timestamp. It shows that Valerie was no longer in control of her accounts. It also creates a traceable trail that does not rely on eyewitnesses. Over the following days, Valerie's debit card was used multiple more times. It was used so much that the total amount withdrawn reached approximately $5,350. At the same time, Valerie's phone activity changed. Her phone was placed into airplane mode. Digital logs showed that her iCloud account had been accessed. Her banking app was also accessed using biometric authorization. So, whoever did this, they were still in close proximity to Valerie. In addition to the unlawful use of her bank accounts and phone, Valerie's iPad was also removed from her apartment. It was then later sold. Each of these actions occurred after Valerie's time on this earth had already ended. All of this information together really narrows down the pool of suspects. Bank transactions record times. Cameras record faces. Digital footprints. Do not forget. Now confronted with the evidence, his story changed. He admitted that she was alive when he placed her in the suitcase. So, now the case went from solely relying on evidence to having an actual admission. Because Valerie was transported across state lines, the case then proceeded in federal court. Javier de Silva was charged with kidnapping, resulting in death. The charge carried the possibility of life in prison or the death penalty.
And Diana, as you can well imagine, the family is grief-stricken, but at the same time, they are somewhat relieved as a result of this arrest. The suspect was arraigned just a short while ago down in White Plains. He's being charged with kidnapping, resulting in death. Now, because of various interstate aspects of the case, he is being charged by federal authorities.
I know a lot of people are going to be relieved knowing that there's, this monster, that they caught him already.
Preparing for her daughter's wake, Norma Sanchez is grief-stricken, but at least relieved. Police have arrested Valerie Reyes' ex-boyfriend, Javier de Silva.
My heart dropped. It's like emotions of so much anger and hate, but relieved.
Police from Greenwich and New Rochelle, where Reyes lived, worked the case and arrested de Silva in Queens Monday night.
This same suspect was interviewed jointly by Greenwich and New Rochelle detectives and admitted a role in the death of Valerie Reyes.
He is accused of fraudulently using Reyes' ATM card after she had gone missing. De Silva will be arraigned on federal charges brought by the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Due to the complexity of the interstate nature of the crimes.
Valerie Reyes had been missing 9 days until Monday a week ago, when police in Greenwich found her body, hands and feet bound and stuffed in a suitcase here along Glenville Road. Norma Sanchez said she had only met the ex-boyfriend once before.
When a monster comes and takes your daughter away or your child away, for what? For what? It's not only hurt, it's hate.
In February of 2020, Javier pled guilty. He entered the plea in White Plains Federal Court. The plea both acknowledged the kidnapping and Valerie's end. In September of 2020, sentencing was imposed. Javier da Silva received a sentence of 360 months in federal prison. He was also sentenced to 2 years of supervised release. Under the federal system, there is no parole. He will be well into his 50s before he is eligible for release. Following completion of his sentence, he is expected to then be deported. At sentencing, Valerie's mother addressed the court. She spoke about the daughter that she had lost, and she spoke directly to the man responsible.
A 30-year prison sentence for the man who killed Valerie Reyes, the New Rochelle woman who disappeared from her home in January of 2019.
A judge called Javier da Silva evil and his crime sickening. CBS 2's Tony Aiello was in the courtroom.
Norma Sanchez left the U.S. courthouse in White Plains after an emotional courtroom confrontation, crying as she described her beautiful daughter as someone who brought joy to those who knew her, and directly addressing the man who killed Valerie, telling Javier da Silva he was a worthless soul. You deserve nothing but pain and rejection. Da Silva, briefly her boyfriend, had taped her mouth and bound her hands, leaving her to die. He raided her bank account, stole her iPad, and traded it for electronics he showed off with in this picture. He lied to investigators, claiming he panicked after Valerie fell before admitting guilt last year to a federal crime, causing death during a kidnapping. Da Silva looks different than the pictures we have. He has cut his hair and shaved his beard. Even with a mask on in court, you could tell he was sobbing through much of the proceeding. Da Silva is a Venezuelan national who was in the U.S. illegally. He spoke in court in Spanish, quote, "I will never forgive myself. I cannot ask Valerie's family to forgive me." The defense team submitted letters and photos to show Da Silva had good qualities at odds with his terrible crime. Judge Vincent Persetti did not buy it, saying, quote, "This is not a good person. This is an evil person." There is no parole in the federal system. Javier da Silva will be well into his 50s before he's released from federal prison. At the U.S. courthouse in White Plains, Tony Aiello, CBS 2 News.
The judge described the crime as brutal, callous and cruel, and so, with the sentence imposed, the legal case was ended. But for Valerie's family, the impact will never be over. Valerie was right to not feel safe. On October the 25th, 2023, a police officer in Truman, Arkansas, approached a parked vehicle. Inside the vehicle sat a man, a woman, and 2 young children. Body-worn camera footage shows the woman seated in the front passenger seat. That woman was Katie Ferguson. The officer asked routine questions. Katie said that they were just resting. There was no visible damage to the passenger side door. There was no indication that anything untoward had occurred. And then, 4 days later, that same vehicle was stopped again. Katie, though, she was no longer inside. There was now damage, a hole in the passenger side door. This was partially concealed with tape. Between those 2 traffic stops, something had changed. And now, Katie has not been seen since October the 5th, 2023. But where did she go? Catherine Ann Ferguson lived in Cody, Wyoming, where she was raising 2 young daughters. Most people just called her Katie. She had been in an on-again, off-again relationship for approximately 8 years with Adam Shane Aviles Jr., who was the father of both children. Family members described the relationship as unstable and at times verbally abusive. Relatives stated that Adam was controlling and that he didn't even want Katie socializing independently from him. Both Katie and Adam were described by family as having struggled with substance use in the past. According to relatives, Katie did have periods where she was clean, periods where she was trying to rebuild stability for herself and her children. In May of 2023, Katie left Wyoming and traveled to Alabama with her daughters to stay with her mother, Mona Hartling. Her mother stated that Katie had visible bruising during an earlier period of separation, and that she had even expressed fear about remaining in Wyoming with Adam. During her move to Alabama, Katie sent messages to her stepmother, Angela Ferguson. In those messages, she wrote that she did not want to be stranded on the side of the road with 2 children. She also wrote that she kept on seeing Adam Aviles following them. So, obviously wanting to keep her safe, Angela sent Katie money and helped her secure a hotel room during that trip. These messages of concern and support would later become documented evidence of Katie's state of mind months before her disappearance. They would also show a pattern developing. For the summer of 2023, Katie remained in Alabama with her children. However, at some point in late September, Katie indicated that she wanted to return back to Wyoming. On September 24th, 2023, she communicated with family members about that decision. Relatives later described that decision as unexpected, and this is because Katie had previously stopped speaking with Adam after their breakup. So, despite her earlier well-documented fears, it seems that Katie contacted Adam in order to assist with transporting her and the children back to Wyoming. So, Adam travelled to Alabama in his black 1999 Dodge Durango. The group then began the cross-country drive towards Wyoming in early October. At that point, to all intents and purposes, this was a family just giving it another shot, a collection of parents and children attempting to return home across multiple states. The next confirmed documentation of Katie's presence comes from the body-worn camera footage in Arkansas on October 5th. After that date, though, the timeline gets kind of weird.
What are you guys doing?
Oh, okay.
What you guys up to?
Cleaning up.
Yeah, trying to clean up, head over to Jonesboro.
Say it again?
Trying to clean up and head over to Jonesboro. How are you doing?
Okay. Well, I was just seeing a door open and looked suspicious, so I had to come check it out.
Yeah, we're checking out. Yeah, we're going back.
So are you guys out of Wyoming, or?
Yeah, we're going back.
You going back?
Oh, yeah.
Do you guys have a ID or anything?
ID state? Is Arkansas an ID state?
Say it again?
Is Arkansas an ID state?
Is it an ID state?
Must ID state?
Well, I just need to verify you.
I don't think we've done that. I don't think we're breaking the law.
Okay.
Unless we got a call called on us, I don't think we've done that.
Well, I mean, it is a suspicious vehicle in a parking lot, so.
Call? Someone called in or you drove through?
I was driving right here and I see you guys.
No one called in.
So.
Okay. Yeah, then I won't. If it's not, if Arkansas isn't a must ID.
Do you have your ID on you?
I have no idea where my wallet is right this second.
What's your name?
Catherine.
Catherine.
Ferguson.
Catherine.
Ferguson.
Ferguson?
Yeah.
Out of Wyoming? Say it again.
We would have been at a hotel in Priceland, a bunch of money, so he's been trying.
How long you guys been here in Sherman?
Just one night, yeah. An officer.
You guys just passing through?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, an officer came to the dollar store.
So what are you guys doing over in this area? I'm like traveling this way. You guys family or?
Yeah. Well,
She was down in Alabama.
Yeah.
Say it again.
I was with my family, and then he came up.
Where's your family? In Jonesboro?
No. It's all the way way down towards Florida and stuff. And his I took the girls for a while, and we separated for a while, and then we came back together. So he drove down to see me, and we decided just to get back together and take care of the girls. So.
Gotcha.
This is just the way from Cody Wild
to
Alabama. Yeah, I know where to be here.
All right.
The most reliable anchors in the timeline of this case come from law enforcement contacts that was captured on video. It's these stops that create a narrow window where Katie is confirmed present, and she is then confirmed absent. Because there is no verified public sighting after October the 5th, that Arkansas stop becomes a baseline that investigators measure everything against. It also becomes the moment that family members point to when they say, "That is the last time we can prove she was there." 4 days after that baseline, another stop in Texas now introduces 2 changes that matter legally and procedurally and flip this whole thing upside down. In Texas, Katie is no longer in the vehicle, and the passenger side door, that now shows signs of damage that was described as a projectile hole, a hole that had been covered over with tape. a state trooper in Texas, asks a direct question about the children's mother. Adam responds by saying that Katie does not have a phone, and this is because it's broken. He also says that he cannot get in touch with her. In a typical welfare check scenario, that kind of answer can trigger follow-up steps, because it shows that the adult who should be present and in charge of the children, they're not there and they also can't be contacted. Situations like this could also be showing signs of a potential cover-up. This is because the trooper can now not confirm Katie's status, because she cannot be contacted by phone. So now, regardless of what has actually happened to Katie, things have really changed, because this is the first moment where the story becomes dependent on only Adam's explanations, rather than confirmations or information from Katie herself. Then, 2 days later, Colorado adds a third data point. Adam is seen once again as the only adult present with the children. So by that point, the pattern is consistent, and it seems obvious that Katie is no longer there. She does not reappear at later stops or on CCTV, and there is no outward sign that she is travelling separately with her own vehicle. At different points in the reporting, Adam is described as giving different explanations. In one version, he claims that Katie was not actually missing, but she simply did not want contact with her own mother. Another version claims that she left during an substance run, as I'll call it, on YouTube. Great. And that this happened in the Little Rock area, and that she did not return from that. At this point in the investigation, it's not really about which of Adam's stories should be believed. It's which of the stories can be independently verified against timestamps, locations, and physical evidence. So, thankfully in this case, the car with Adam and the children was stopped often enough for there to be quite a lot of video evidence that she suddenly went missing. However, this evidence does span multiple states, and this increases the complexity of the records, the requests for data, and the coordination of the investigation in general. In the United States, if a disappearance becomes suspected to have occurred somewhere between jurisdictions, travel routes then have to be reconstructed using traffic stops, things like toll data, fuel purchases, and phone records when available. So in this case, the stops are already documented, but it's those missing gaps that seem to hold the secrets to this case. This is why later reporting describes investigators focusing on an Arkansas corridor between Little Rock and Gurdon. So, with all of the data points combined, authorities now have an idea of the timeline and the location where Katie actually vanished. Nearly a month after Katie could last be accounted for, on October 2nd, 2023, Katie's mother Mona contacted the Cody Police Department and reported her daughter missing. This is a point where law enforcement officially start the search. Within just 2 days, however, another event moves the case from simple concern to full-on suspected foul play. On November 4th, 2023, Adam's black 1999 Dodge Durango is found abandoned in a remote area outside Cody, Wyoming, in a place described as the Oregon Basin region. Trash bags blocked the view through the windows. Deputies break a window to make sure that no one is inside needing medical assistance. And when they do this, an odor described in documents as putrefied blood, or red DNA as I have to call it here, is then reported by investigators at the scene. Inside the vehicle, the front passenger seat is now missing. Cleaning wipes and other cleaning-related items are noted in reporting. A loaded magazine for a .45 caliber handgun is located in that vehicle. Projectile damage is also documented in the front passenger door area, and that has been covered up with tape. Investigators later describe recovering fired projectiles that are consistent with the .45 caliber rounds that match up with everything to do with the scene. Court records confirm that Adam had prior felony conviction for possession of brown in Park County, Wyoming. Because of that conviction, federal law now prohibited him from possessing firearms or ammunition. Interior trim and components are described as being removed and then being placed into trash bags inside the vehicle. Lab testing later confirmed that dried red DNA is present in the vehicle. This discovery introduces a second kind of timeline, one that is separate from the traffic stops. The first timeline is where the vehicle was seen and when. The second timeline is what the vehicle actually contains, and whether those contents can be dated or linked to a specific person. Could they perhaps be linked to when Katie was last seen in that car? The fact that in that vehicle the passenger seat is missing, that's extremely important and suspicious, because the physical absence of a seat can't just be explained away by normal wear or routine cleanup. It also matters because it's directly connected to where Katie was seen seated in the last confirmed footage of her. Whilst deputies were still processing the vehicle, Adam Aviles actually approaches the scene and, get this, he's carrying a gas can. He tells deputies that he's simply there to put gas in the Durango. Little problem with that though. Katie's mother Mona, she later stated that officers told her that the vehicle was not actually out of gas. Regardless of the motive of Adam having that gas, approaching the vehicle with it becomes a documented interaction, because even though it is his vehicle, it links him to it once again in this active investigation. There's no way that in the future he can say, I don't know what happened, someone stole the car. By this stage, the case is no longer just a missing persons report, simply supported by worried family statements. It becomes a case where a vehicle associated with a missing person, it's found, it contains evidence, and it's serious enough that investigators treat it as suspicious. Thorough testing was carried out on the car. After the Durango was processed, attention turned back to that missing front passenger seat, the place where Katie was last seen alive on October the 5th. Investigators later learned that after returning to Wyoming, Adam reportedly borrowed an angle grinder from a friend. Testimony referenced in reporting suggests that the tool was then used to cut or remove something from the vehicle. So the timing of this becomes relevant. If a component was removed after the cross-country trip, but before law enforcement could fully secure the vehicle, then when and why did this modification occur? Around this same time, another suspicious item enters the record. Adam Aviles' father, he reportedly discovered a large pink tote container at the Cody residence that he shared with his son. According to testimony cited in reporting, that container emitted an odor described as rotting meat. The father reportedly placed that tote in a dumpster. Court testimony later summarized in news coverage states that Adam then retrieved that tote and even told his father that it contained DNA. Frustratingly for the investigation, authorities never recovered that tote. So this case was now suffering from the absence of potential evidence that could have been a direct link, showing exactly what happened to Katie. If indeed there was DNA as Adam stated, that could have been the case, cut and dry. Investigators now had to make up for that lack of physical evidence. During the investigation, the FBI conducted a forensic interview with the older child. I say older, but they were only 4 years old at the time. Documentation says that the child made a statement about her father accidentally hurting her mother. Authorities have not publicly released further detail about that statement or exactly what was said, but we can imagine it was powerful to the case. Meanwhile, investigators had narrowed their search to that Arkansas corridor between Little Rock and Gurdon. At one point, a strip of fabric was reportedly found, fabric that Katie's mother Mona believed matched the pattern of Katie's pajamas. Although Mona believes this, law enforcement has not publicly confirmed it, so we can't be 100% sure. Because the passenger seat and the pink tote remain missing, the Park County Sheriff's Office publicly asked hunters, hikers, and other outdoors people to watch for those specific items. Those two objects, if they still exist, they almost certainly contain DNA evidence. I mean, it is unlikely, but if you're in the area, just keep an eye out. At this stage, the case hinges on both what was found and what wasn't. On November the 8th, 2023, Adam Aviles was arrested by the Park County Sheriff's Office on local allegations including substance possession and unauthorized use of a vehicle. Those local charges were later dropped, as then federal prosecutors pursued a felon in possession of ammunition case instead. The legal basis for that charge was Adam Avila's prior felony conviction, which banned him from possessing firearms or ammunition under federal law. A federal indictment followed in mid-November 2023. Adam Aviles eventually entered a guilty plea in a federal ammunition case. On September 13, 2024, he was sentenced to 87 months in federal prison. During sentencing, U.S. District Court Judge Alan B. Johnson found that Aviles unlawfully possessed the ammunition in connection with the voluntary manslaughter of Catherine Ferguson, or Katie as we have been referring to her. This is according to official reporting from the U.S. Attorney's Office. However, no state murder or manslaughter charge has been publicly filed in connection with Katie's disappearance. That distinction is procedural and very important here, because a federal firearms conviction addresses unlawful possession, but a homicide prosecution would require separate charging decisions, different evidence standards, and different jurisdictional authority. Law enforcement officials have stated that the investigation into Katie's disappearance does remain active. Multiple agencies have been and are still involved, including the Park County Sheriff's Office, the Wyoming Division of Criminal Investigation, the FBI, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives. Sheriff Darrell Stewart has publicly stated that the federal sentence provides breathing room for investigators while Adam Aviles remains in custody. Katie's daughters are reported to be living with Aviles' mother in Wyoming. Katie's mother, Mona Hartling, has stated that she is allowed to visit them. The family has since established the Katie Ferguson Memorial Fund at Bighorn Federal Bank and US Bank to assist with search efforts and memorial planning. As of the latest reporting that I could find, sadly, despite coordinated and exhaustive efforts across agencies, Katie, or more likely, Katie's remains, have not been located. The pink tote has not been recovered. The passenger seat has not been located. The confirmed timeline still begins with October 5th, 2023 in Arkansas. Everything after that date is only based on what investigators could piece together. The unanswered question is still the same. Between the stops in Arkansas and Texas, what happened in those 4 days? Where is Katie?
Hello, Mariana. Surprised to see me again? Not really.
On May the 19th, 2024, deputies were dispatched to a remote stretch of desert known as Pajarito Mesa in Bernalillo County, New Mexico. It was approximately 4 p.m. A caller had reported finding a man in the area. The location sits west of Albuquerque. It is isolated, quiet, and generally difficult to access. When deputies arrived, they discovered the male. He wasn't moving. Officers believed that he had been there for quite some time. At that moment, investigators did not know who he was. There were no immediate answers as to how he arrived there. There were no clear signs explaining who he had been with. The location itself raised an immediate question. How does a 16-year-old end up in a remote desert far from home? As detectives began retracing the final 24 hours of this young man's life, the sequence of events that emerged had some of the most insane twists and most disturbing pieces of evidence I've ever seen. So, what happened in the desert? On May the 19th, 2024, Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office deputies responded to Pajarito Mesa. They'd received a call about a body in the area. Pajarito Mesa is a remote desert location in southwest Albuquerque. It's accessible by dirt roads, and it's not a place that has heavy traffic. When deputies arrived, they located the body of a male. Investigators observed at least one gunshot wound. The case was immediately treated as a homicide. Remote homicide scenes such as this present unique challenges for investigators. Desert terrain can complicate evidence recovery due to wind exposure, interference by wildlife, and the lack of surveillance that you would see in a more urban area. There were no businesses nearby with CCTV. This was not the kind of place you'd get pedestrian witnesses. All of this means that detectives must rely heavily on forensic processing and on potential digital evidence to reconstruct events. At first, deputies faced a significant obstacle to get the investigation moving at all. They did not have a confirmed identity for the victim. Identification is a critical early step because it determines where investigators could even begin looking for motive, on who they could be looking at as suspects, or any potential evidence at their home or places that they frequent. In this case, the breakthrough came when the family of a missing 16-year-old reported him missing. The victim was identified as Jesus Quintana Cota. Some reports also reference his full name as Jesus Yoram Quintana Cota. The identification process required careful verification due to his age. Authorities later stated that the delay in public notification was intentional. Officials explained that maintaining investigative integrity and properly notifying family members took priority over immediate media release. Public announcement of this case was not made until May 30th, 2024. That was 11 days after the initial discovery. That delay drew questions from members of the community and from individuals who contacted local outlets, asking why the case had not been covered sooner. Law enforcement stated that detectives needed time to confirm identity and to follow some initial leads before releasing details. During this period, the homicide unit began working backwards from the discovery site. When a victim is found in a remote area such as this, investigators typically attempt to determine whether that location is the primary scene or if it is a secondary disposal site. This obviously matters massively. You don't want to be working on a case from the wrong place right from the start. If this ending had occurred elsewhere, then it would expand the geographic scope of this investigation. But if it had occurred at Pajarito Mesa, then it narrows the timeline. As detectives analysed digital communications, interviews, and vehicle movements, a picture began to form. The investigation would eventually connect Jesus to 3 people. All of them were under 19 years old, and according to court filings, the events that led to that desert began the day before, under the pretense of something much more ordinary. On June 27, 2024, just a month after deputies discovered Jesus' body, 3 suspects were taken into custody. The arrests followed an investigation that was led by the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office Homicide Unit, working in coordination with the 2nd Judicial District Attorney's Office. The individuals arrested were Daniel Medrano Garcia, aged 18, Dominic Marquez, aged 17, and Marina Gomez Salinas, aged 18.
Right there, put that stuff down real quick. Want to drop your bag as well?
Yeah.
Don't turn around.
Are you guys gonna grab this?
We'll take care of everything. Don't turn around. Thank you. Thanks for being cooperative with us. Where do you want to put your stuff? What were you going to ask me to do?
What do I do with my truck? Can you call my mom or something?
Go ahead and sit right there. I'll put these at your feet. I'll put the food right here.
Hello, Mariana. Surprised to see me again? Not really. I'm with the sheriff's office. I'll be the one coming in, chatting with you here in a little bit, okay? We have a lot going on, clearly. So if you need anything, just knock on the door, okay? Someone will come.
And then I'll be trying to make a call.
So that will happen when you get booked into jail. It doesn't happen here.
And then where do I have a warrant for?
We'll explain that, okay? Because there's some things I have to advise you before we talk, okay? All right, I know you have a lot of questions. I have all the answers, so I will be back in just a little bit, okay? I'll try to find out one for you.
Although Medrano Garcia and Gomez Salinas were 18 at the time of the arrest, court records indicate that all 3 of them were juveniles at the time of the crime. Medrano Garcia and Gomez Salinas were booked into the Metropolitan Detention Center. Marquez was booked into the Youth Services Center. All 3 of them were initially charged with first-degree murder, with kidnapping, robbery, conspiracy, and tampering with evidence. Those charges reflected the state's position that the incident was not spontaneous, and during subsequent hearings, prosecutors emphasized that text messages suggested coordination both before and after the event. Pre-trial detention then became the immediate issue. The state filed motions requesting that Marquez and Medrano Garcia both remain in custody pending trial. Judge Joseph Montano granted those motions. He had previously ordered Gomez Salinas to remain in custody as well. In one hearing, The judge said that the state had proved by clear and convincing evidence that Gomez Salinas may still pose a danger to the public. That ruling prevented release whilst awaiting trial.
I do believe that the state has proved by clear and convincing evidence that Ms. Gomez Salinas may pose a danger to the public.
On the other side of things, the third of 3 teenage suspects facing first-degree murder charges found out she will stay in jail until her trial. Today, her defense argued Gomez Salinas believed they were only trying to plot a robbery and said because of that, she should be released. Also, in addition to her age and lack of criminal history, the judge did not buy that whatsoever and decided she will be behind bars until trial.
At a public news conference in July 2024, Bernalillo County Sheriff John Allen and District Attorney Sam Bregman both addressed the case directly. Bregman stated that he would personally prosecute the case, alongside Chief Deputy District Attorney Natalie Lyon. Sheriff Allen publicly connected the case to broader concerns about rising violent juvenile crime in Albuquerque. During this period, officials also noted that the juvenile detention center population had risen to near capacity. The maximum capacity was reported as 65, and at the time of the announcement, there were 63 inmates.
3 arrests just from this, and the 2 that you see, I saw a lot of questions on social media. Why is a juvenile not pictured? We can't picture someone that's a juvenile. But here is a main point on this case, which involves speed racing, which goes into other violent crime charges, and the tip of the spear, which ended up in a homicide. Before I continue in that case, I am glad that we can at least bring the family of the victim some type of closure, even though it does not bring their loved one back. So we're working very hard and diligently through the collaboration that we have with DA Bregman's office to bring people to justice. Daniel Medrano Garcia and Mariano Gomez Salinas, so you see, the only reason their photos are up here is because they were booked into MDC and they're 18 years old. But please highlight that they were 17 years old as a juvenile when they committed and helped with this homicide. These are 3 more people, 3 more juveniles that have committed the tip of the spear homicide in our community.
As the case moved forward, the 3 defendants would take different legal paths. One would accept a plea, one would be acquitted of the most serious charge, and one would remain locked up, awaiting trial. According to court documents, the chain of events that led to Pajarito Mesa began on May 18, 2024. Prosecutors later stated that the attack may have been connected to an earlier incident, one that occurred on April 1, 2024. In that April incident, Jesus Quintana Cota allegedly took shots at a white Chrysler 300, a vehicle that belonged to Daniel Medrano Garcia. This event allegedly happened in northwest Albuquerque. That incident was reported to Albuquerque police. Before the identity of victim Jesus was released, both of these events appeared completely separate. But prosecutors will later argue that it may have provided context for everything that unfolded weeks later. Whether it was retaliation or confrontation, investigators focused on communications between the teenagers in the days leading up to May the 18th. Text messages were cited in court as evidence, suggesting a level of planning both before and after Jesus met his end. Digital communications are often central in modern investigations because they create pre-made timestamps, they give indicators of intent, and they also reveal general links between networks of people. In this case, those messages would later be referenced during detention hearings and used as justification for keeping the defendants in custody. So, what actually happened in the desert? On May the 18th, Mariana Gomez Salinas contacted Jesus. She lured him under the pretense of going on a date. At the time of the incident, Gomez Salinas was 16 years old. Jesus was also 16. Court filings state that she drove him to a lookout area near Dennis Chavez and Atrisco Vista. That location would become the first confirmed physical meeting point of the day. When Jesus and Mariana arrived, Daniel Medrano Garcia and Dominic Marquez were already waiting. According to the criminal complaint, Medrano and Marquez beat Jesus at that location. He was then loaded into Gomez Salinas' vehicle, and at this stage, the legal classification of this case shifted. Once someone is forcibly moved against their will, the charge threshold for kidnapping can now be met under New Mexico law. This detail would later become significant during Gomez Salinas' trial. Her defense attorney, Christopher C. Marlowe, argued that she believed only a robbery was going to take place. He also stated publicly that Mariana had been used by the boys in order to arrange the meeting. Lawyer Marlowe further claimed that if she had not cooperated, that the two others would have harmed her. Those statements introduced a dispute over intent and coercion. However, prosecutors emphasized the planning component, referencing text messages that they argued demonstrated coordination. Judge Joseph Montano later referenced those communications during detention hearings. He said that they suggested a devastating level of planning. At this point, the timeline shows that there was that prior incident in April. There was a digital footprint of text messages, and there was a planned meetup under false pretenses, all of which combined resulted in Jesus being physically restrained and placed into a vehicle. What remained unclear was how that situation escalated from a beating at a lookout to becoming an actual fatal event in a remote desert area.
Here's the thing, okay? And I really need you to think about this. Okay? Yeah, no, I don't think you're a bad kid. Cam, I got nothing against you. I don't know you. I've never met you before in my life. Okay? But right now is your chance to be honest about what happened. Because let me tell you, right now, you're facing a first-degree murder. That's life in prison. Yeah. You go away forever. Okay? You're 18. Forever is a long time. Yeah. Okay? That is a long time. Okay? So that's what you're charged with, because I haven't talked.
That's what I warrant for?
First-degree murder, kidnapping, robbery, conspiracy, and tampering. Yes.
Cool.
So we're going to talk about that. Okay.
It's first-degree murder?
First-degree murder, kidnapping, conspiracy.
What is that?
Basically, you worked with other people to do stuff. Tampering with the evidence. That's basically you got rid of some stuff, you damaged stuff, you deleted stuff, that type of stuff. And then the kidnapping and robbery. Those are the two others. Okay?
No.
So why was Dominic wanting to unalive?
I don't know.
You do know.
I guess revenge for me. But
okay. Did you ask for it?
The next phase of the timeline would answer that question, but not all of it. After Jesus was placed in the vehicle on May the 18th, the group then travelled onwards. According to the criminal complaint, the next step involved picking up another individual. Investigators allege that the group picked up an unidentified older Mexican male. Court documents state that this man pointed a rifle at Jesus. So, at that stage, you have the three teens initially implicated, and this new, older man. The presence of an older individual introduced a new layer to the investigation. Authorities have stated that the unidentified man was the one that allegedly actually pulled the trigger. At various points during court proceedings, defense counsel noted that this alleged shooter was not in custody. That detail would later become central to how responsibility was argued in court.
Kind of explain a little bit about what's going on. Okay. I'm going to have another detective come in here, and he is going to show you a series of photographs about that other person you told me about, the guy with the sombrero. And he's going to explain it. He has no clue. He doesn't know anything about this case. So even if you ask him, I just have to use someone that has no idea about the case, present this to you. If you see him, great. If you don't, or not. Once that's done, I'm going to come in and...
Is that going to happen soon?
Yes. It's going to happen in about 2 minutes. You're going to come in. And then when he's done, I'll come in, I'll finish up with you, and then it will be done.
So it'll just be like pictures?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And don't feel like you have to choose. If you see the person, great. If you remember that person, great. If you don't, it's not a big deal. Don't feel like you have to choose someone. Other people, in this case, they talk as well. So, we're just trying to find out who this other person is. Yeah.
You guys got Dominic and Daniel, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, and we're trying to find out who that other person is.
After picking up the older man, the group drove onwards to Pajarito Mesa. This, of course, is the remote desert location where Jesus' body would be discovered the following day. The criminal complaint states that when they arrived at the mesa, all individuals exited the vehicle. Gomez Salinas later told investigators that she then heard the males fighting. She also reported hearing gunfire. According to the complaint, the others then returned to the vehicle, but Jesus did not. The vehicle then left the mesa without him. In this case, the complaint suggests that the confrontation and gunfire occurred at Pajarito Mesa itself. However, investigators still needed to rely on physical evidence, on forensic processing, and digital timelines to confirm sequence and participation. One question that emerged during court proceedings involved a degree of participation by each defendant. Prosecutors argued that the events were coordinated and planned, but the defense counsel for Mariana argued that she did not fire a weapon and that she had simply been pressured into participating. That distinction would later matter. Another unresolved issue involves the unidentified older man, but at the time of court proceedings, the man remained at large. That left a central question hanging over the case. If the alleged shooter was not in custody, how would responsibility now be distributed among the teens who were present? As the case moved into 2025, the three defendants' legal paths began to separate.
Marquez took a plea deal in connection to the shooting death of a teen whose body was found on the Pajarito Mesa. Police say then 17-year-old Marquez, Daniel Medrano Garcia, and Mariana Gomez planned to rob 16-year-old Jesus Quintana Cota in May of 2024. Judge Joseph Montano accepted Marquez's no contest plea to first-degree murder and armed robbery.
Dominic Marquez was the first to resolve his case. In September of 2025, he entered a no contest plea to his first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, armed robbery, tampering with evidence, and conspiracy to commit tampering with evidence charges. Judge Joseph Montano accepted his plea. Marquez faced a sentencing range of 12 to 22 years in prison. The state argued that the crime was coordinated and planned out. This was not spontaneous. The defense requested leniency based on his age at the time of the offense. The court ultimately sentenced Marquez to 22 years in the New Mexico Corrections Department. That sentence reflected the top end of the available range. Mariana Gomez Salinas chose a different path and went to trial. Her jury trial began in early October 2025, before Judge Joseph A. Montano in the 2nd Judicial District Court. The jury deliberated for approximately 9 hours over 2 days. At the conclusion of those deliberations, the jury returned their verdicts. Gomez Salinas was acquitted of first-degree murder. She was acquitted of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. She was acquitted of armed robbery. She was acquitted of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. However, the jury convicted her of kidnapping. Mariana was also convicted of tampering with evidence and conspiracy to commit tampering with evidence. Under New Mexico law, a kidnapping conviction in a case connected to a fatal outcome, it can carry a substantial sentence, even without a murder conviction. Gomez Salinas faced up to 22.5 years in prison. At sentencing, members of Jesus' family delivered impact statements. A family member described him as bright, kind and loving, and spoke about the compounded loss following the earlier death of his mother. Judge Montano sentenced Gomez Salinas to 19.5 years in prison. Her attorney, Christopher C. Marlowe, had previously argued that she did not fire the weapon and had been pressured by the others. And the jury's verdict did kind of reflect that, because they didn't hold her directly responsible, but as a participant in the abduction and aftermath. Meanwhile, Daniel Medrano Garcia remains charged with first-degree murder, with kidnapping and other related offences. At the time of the latest reporting, his trial had not yet concluded. There is also the unresolved matter of the unidentified older man. He was described in court documents as having pointed the rifle at Jesus, and allegedly the triggerman. Multiple reports stated that he remained at large during key stages of proceedings. That leaves an open question within the case record. So, 2 teenagers have now received prison sentences totaling nearly 4 decades. One defendant is still awaiting trial, but it does look like he's going down. Overall, this whole thing is just a tragic waste of the lives of at least 4 people.
You're so young. All you guys are. And to do something like this was just insane. I mean, if for whatever reason you find yourself able to not go to prison forever. I hope you learn from this so hopefully you make better decisions, because you're 18 and your life your decisions matter. Because brother lost his life because he helped. And just being honest. I've always been honest with you and been truthful with you. And it's unfortunate. It's a tragedy all the way around. You guys are so young. And you guys are facing some of the most serious crimes that you can be charged with. Your first degree is the highest you can be charged with.
The video begins with a smiling young woman standing on a hotel balcony in Mexico. She is on her first trip outside of Canada. The trip is meant to celebrate her birthday. The resort is 5-star. Palm trees, white stone, infinity pools, and views to die for. This part of Mexico is marketed as safe, contained, and insulated from danger. Guests are told they will never need to leave the property. Everything they could want is already inside the gates. But just beyond those gates, the region operates under a different reality. Local businesses in this area are known to pay a cartel tax to operate. Control is enforced quietly, consistently, and with consequences. Life on one side of the fence compared to the other is a complete contradiction. How could something like this happen inside a place designed to feel untouchable? Who really has access to a resort that claims total security? And what happens when all hell breaks loose in a slice of vacation heaven? In this video, you will learn 7 things about this case that make it truly disturbing. Kiera Agnew was 23 years old. She lived in Dawson Creek, British Columbia. In early March of 2023, she travelled to Playa del Carmen with her boyfriend Ryan Friesen. The trip was planned to celebrate her upcoming 24th birthday. This was her first time leaving Canada. The couple checked into the Grand Sunset Princess Hotel, a resort that is large, gated. It is a 5-star property. It's one of those holiday destinations that is designed to keep guests inside the site for the duration of their stay, like a contained resort. Short videos sent to families show Kiera relaxed and excited, and in what would become her final video that she ever recorded, she is standing on the balcony of their hotel room.
We just got situated in our room, and we're gonna go get some food and then head to the beach.
But less than 12 hours after checking in, Kiera's time would have come to an end.
Kiera loved to travel. She has wanted to travel since she's been little, like so much that she made her mom get her passport so, they could travel together. That's something they were really looking forward to do. And this was a birthday trip, and Kiera planned it. She was really excited about it. We're going to Maya Riviera to go snorkeling and see the Mayan ruins, visit the beaches, go shopping. It's a trip that she really was excited for.
On the night of March the 2nd, surveillance cameras captured Kiera and Ryan at the resort bar. They were drinking together inside the hotel. At approximately midnight, the cameras show them leaving the bar. This is the last confirmed footage of Kiera Agnew alive. What happened after they left that bar would later become one of the most disputed parts of this case. Because, from this point forwards, investigators would have to rely heavily on a single account. That account would come from the only other person with Kiera that night. And the question that follows is simple. If a resort is designed to be restricted and safe, if all of the security protocols in place, then why does so much of what happened next rely on just one person's version of events? At approximately 2:55 a.m., a resort cleaner arrived at the laundry room. The cleaner had previously worked at the hotel, and they were familiar with the area. Inside that room, the cleaner found Kiera Agnew and Ryan Friesen lying on the floor. They were positioned side by side. Ryan's feet were near Kiera's head. She was not moving, completely unresponsive. Kiera's time was officially pronounced ended at the scene. The cleaner reported that Kiera was fully clothed. One of her shoes, however, was on the floor nearby. The cleaner observed red DNA on the walls outside of the laundry room. He also observed red DNA on the surrounding floor. He described the area as showing signs of a struggle. The laundry room door was partially opened when he arrived. The cleaner stated that that door did not have a lock. As we know, Ryan was still in that room when the cleaner arrived, and they said that Ryan did appear to be intoxicated. He said that Ryan did not wake up immediately. He said that he had to shake him to wake him up. And then, strangely, after waking, the cleaner claims that Ryan attempted to run up the stairs. Other staff then restrained him until police arrived. From a procedural standpoint, this moment freezes the scene in time. Everything that investigators would later analyze had to be understood exactly as it appeared in these first minutes. Who arrived first? Was anything moved? Who saw what? In this case, though, investigators were left with a very narrow set of facts. 2 people inside a laundry room that they should not have been in. One of them now no longer with us. How and why did this happen to Kiera?
It's beyond tragic. Everyone's kind of in disbelief, and what we want is justice for Kiera. We want her home. We want everything to come out. We want the truth to come out. We want whoever did this to be held accountable because it wasn't their choice to make. She wanted to live.
Family members have identified the victim as Kiera Agnew from Dawson Creek.
After leaving the resort bar, Ryan says that he and Kiera returned to their hotel room. He says that the 2 of them argued. However, he has not publicly detailed what that argument was actually about. There is no independent audio or video record of that conversation. Ryan says that after the argument, he then fell asleep. He says he then later woke up at approximately 2:30 a.m. and he says that when he woke, Kiera was no longer in their room. At that point, Ryan claims that he heard Kiera screaming. He says that the sound was coming from somewhere outside of the room. Ryan says that he followed the sound of the screams throughout the resort. He says that they led him towards a laundry room on the property. According to Ryan, the laundry room door was locked. He says that he beat on the door, and he says that someone inside eventually opened it. Ryan claims that Kiera was sitting on the floor when he entered. He claims that she had been disgustingly violated. He said that there were 3 to 4 other people in the room. This version of events was later shared by Kiera's stepfather, Ricky Matchett. When Ricky asked Ryan how he ended up on the floor next to Kiera, Ryan could not explain it. Ricky says that he asked that question 3 separate times. From the standpoint of the investigation going forwards, this really does matter because the timeline depends almost entirely on Ryan's account. There are no surveillance cameras in the hallways that show Ryan's path from his hotel room to the laundry room. There is no footage of anyone else entering or leaving the laundry room. So this leads investigators to ask a difficult question. If multiple attackers were involved, how did they enter and leave a gated resort without being seen? And if they were not seen, what does that say about access, timing, and opportunity within a place that is guaranteed to be safe? As police documented the scene, their report noted red DNA stains on Ryan Frieson's clothing. They also documented the same red DNA on his hands. This was as well as on his feet. A diagram included in a police report mapped visible injuries on Ryan's body. The diagram showed some lacerations on his right hand. It showed lacerations on his right foot. It also showed swelling on his left hand and a bite mark on his right hand. These observations were recorded before any later explanations were offered, and no matter what would happen going forward, this evidence would exist independently of any given statements. Injury documentation like this is a way to capture a person's condition before memory, alcohol, narrative, or defense can influence their interpretation. Strangely, there was no record of defensive injuries on Kiera, consistent with multiple attackers being identified at the scene by Ryan. There was also no physical evidence documented that clearly established the presence of other individuals in that laundry room. At this stage, investigators really had to work with only what could be confirmed. Who in front of them was injured? How were they injured? And did those injuries align with what had been claimed? This is where elements of timelines stop being theoretical, because this physical evidence is really pretty black and white. So, do the documented injuries support a single attacker, or do they require more than one, as Ryan said?
Mexican authorities have arrested a Canadian man after his girlfriend was found dead at a resort south of Cancun. The victim has been identified as 23-year-old Kiara Agnew from Dawson Creek, BC. Her family and friends have launched a GoFundMe campaign to bring her body back home. According to that page, her relatives were notified of her death on Friday. On the same day, Mexican police tweeted that a foreign national was being investigated for femicide. Prosecutors said the man was in custody and the case was being studied for possible charges.
Ryan Friesen was charged with femicide under Mexican law. This is the most serious domestic violence charge in the country. The case proceeded to a judge-only trial in the state of Quintana Roo. There was no jury. The verdict would rest entirely on the judge's interpretation of the available evidence. During the trial, DNA evidence will become central. A report showed that Ryan's DNA was not found under Kiara's fingernails. This same report identified one unknown male DNA profile. The judge accepted this finding as significant. The judge also accepted expert testimony, suggesting that the severity of Kiara's injuries did indicate more than one attacker. And so, in September of 2024, the judge delivered a not guilty verdict towards Ryan. This ruling, however, it did not identify who the other attackers actually were. It also didn't explain how they entered or exited the resort unseen. After the verdict, the DNA report was independently reviewed by forensic biologists. They confirmed that Ryan's DNA was not present under Kiara's fingernails. They also confirmed the presence of one unknown male profile. They added critical context. They stated that fingernail DNA does not prove guilt or innocence. They stated that foreign DNA can be picked up through ordinary daily contact. They stated that if a person is unable to fight, there may be no attacker DNA present at all. These clarifications introduced a problem. It seems that the DNA evidence only really explained some possibilities of what could have happened, but it did not resolve the central question of what actually happened in that room. Altogether, that means this case is not as finished as it appeared. After the not guilty verdict, Ryan Friesen offered a different explanation for Kiara's demise. He claimed that this attack was carried out by the cartel. According to Ryan, the resort actually owed money to the cartel and they refused to pay them. He claimed that Kiara was targeted as a warning. This claim introduced a new line of inquiry, because while cartels do operate in the region, their methods tend to follow recognizable patterns. To test this theory, W5 News traveled to Playa del Carmen. They met face-to-face with a long-standing member of the Sinaloa cartel. He was identified only as Alberto. Alberto confirmed that cartels do exert control in the area. He confirmed that local businesses are expected to pay a tax to them, and he confirmed that violence is used to enforce that control. But when he was asked directly about Kiara's death, Alberto rejected that claim. He said that cartels do not carry out executions inside resorts. He said that they do not target tourists inside private rooms. He explained that when cartels send messages, they are public. The whole idea is that they are meant to be seen. They are meant to spread fear. So a hidden killing inside a laundry room, this did not fit that pattern. So according to Alberto, cartel violence is not random. It is strategic. It is a tool. And when they use it, it's designed to be unmistakable. So investigators were now left with another contradiction, a theory that could have explained the level of violence, but not in this location, nor using this method, nor doing it in private. And this meant that the question shifted once again. If it was not a message sent from the cartel, if Ryan was found innocent, then who did this? Before Kiera ever arrived in Mexico, there was a record of what her relationship looked like in private. It actually existed in her own handwriting. During the trial, Kiera's sister testified that Kiera kept a journal. Entries in that journal described escalating violence within the relationship. In one entry, Kiera wrote about being hurt by Ryan whilst he was intoxicated. She described being struck repeatedly. She described begging him to stop. She wrote down that he passed out afterwards. She claimed that he did not remember what had happened the next day. She even said that he initially accused her of lying. She wrote that only visible swelling made him accept that it had actually occurred. Kiera's journal was powerful. It put evidence towards a pattern rather than just a one-off incident. Investigators can't look at journals as proof of a single event, at least not something like this retrospectively. Instead, they could look at this journal as insight into ongoing dynamics, into control and escalation. They could look at what happened behind closed doors when nobody else was present. The journal does not describe an unfamiliar person. It describes someone that Kiera knew better than anyone. It painted a picture of someone whose anger appeared suddenly, of someone whose behavior changed when alcohol became involved. This context can reshape how claims are later evaluated. The journal alone does not get to decide guilt, but it can limit what explanations remain plausible, because when DV has a documented history, new questions may have to be asked. So, was what happened in Mexico an unpredictable anomaly, or was it the final point in a pattern that had already been written down and documented? To really drive forward what was being shared in the privacy of her diary, here is an excerpt from it. 2 mornings ago, Ryan hurt me in a way I never thought he would. He came around to my side of the bed, grabbed my hair hard, and smacked me hard on the right side of my face. I begged him to stop, but he just kept getting angrier and kept smacking me in the face hard. He then mocked my crying and stated that no one feels bad for me. He went to his side and passed out. I left after he fell asleep. The next day, he didn't even remember it. When I told him, he thought I was lying. Then he saw my swollen face at the end of the day, and he knew I wasn't. He can be so heartless at the drop of a hat, it's scary. He scares me. If I am ever missing or found dead, you know who did it. You know it was him, and you can't let him get away with it.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. And we begin with breaking news tonight in the case of a Dawson Creek woman murdered in Mexico. Kiera Agnew's boyfriend is now guilty in connection to the 23-year-old's death. After a review of the case by a Mexican magistrate, Ryan Friesen's not guilty ruling has been overturned. Kiera was at a 5-star resort in Playa del Carmen nearly 3 years ago. Friesen was charged in her killing but was found not guilty by a Mexican judge. Ryan was found asleep beside her body in a resort laundry room with swollen fists, bruises, and covered in blood. Global Affairs Canada has reached out to Kiera's family, telling them that Friesen is now considered guilty. When asked about Kiera's murder, the state deputy prosecutor responded that she believed it was established beyond a reasonable doubt that the crime was committed by Ryan.
After the not guilty verdict, Mexican prosecutors appealed a decision. An independent magistrate was assigned to review the judge's reasoning. In December of 2025, that magistrate overturned the acquittal. The ruling declared that the original verdict could not stand. Ryan Friesen filed an amparo appeal. Under Mexican law, this appeal is reviewed by a panel of 3 federal judges. While the appeal proceeds, Ryan remains in Canada. If the appeal fails, he faces up to 50 years in prison in Mexico. This reignited a public response. Protests were organized across Canada. Some had already been ongoing since the original acquittal. Petitions were launched demanding that the conviction be enforced. Another petition called for new legislation, referred to as Kiera's Law. The proposal would require mandatory Canadian forensic autopsies in suspicious deaths abroad. It would expand consular services for families. It would seek Canadian jurisdiction in cases involving Canadian-on-Canadian violence overseas. At the centre of all of this, though, is one fixed reality. Kiera did not come home from her birthday trip, from her first vacation in the sun.
What that monster was charged with today can make some people just completely lost for words.
He's not a monster. What he did was savage. What he did was monstrous. He's not a monster.
It was a quiet afternoon in Alton, Illinois. The kind of quiet that feels safe and comforting. But then, a phone rings. At 12:59 p.m., dispatchers took a call from a frantic mother. Her daughter wasn't answering. Something felt wrong. Officers rushed to a small apartment on Bolivar Street, and there they found Heidi Noel sitting on the step, shaking, pale, unable to speak. Inside was her 22-year-old daughter, Lisa Dodd. Lisa was nearly 8 months pregnant. Her baby shower invitations had just gone out that week. Also found were pink decorations, a nickname printed on every card. It read, Baby Bean. But instead of a celebration, Heidi had walked into something that no parent should ever have to face. What police discovered inside that apartment left even the most seasoned detectives stunned, some requiring therapy. The Alton police chief would later call it beyond reprehensible, a crime, he said, committed by a monster. But how did things ever reach this point? This case is haunting me, and I think it will haunt you too. Before the events of this case, Lisa Ann Dodd was simply a young woman building a life. She grew up in Jerseyville, Illinois, where everyone knew her smile. She was kind, gentle, and endlessly thoughtful. As a kid, she once asked for donations to the local animal shelter instead of birthday gifts. That was Lisa, soft-hearted but strong. By her early 20s, she'd finished school and was now working in food service. She was also dreaming about becoming a nurse like her mother, Heidi. She was also a caretaker by nature, always lifting up everyone around her. And then came the happiest news of her life. Lisa was pregnant. It would be a baby girl due in late July. She called her Baby Bean. Every night she'd speak with her mum and send her photos of her baby bump. They'd talk about nursery ideas and baby names. The baby shower invitations had just been sent out. They were cheerful and full of hope. Everything was now ready for the next chapter of her life. But there was one part of her life that she didn't talk about that much, and that was her on and off relationship with DeAndre Holloway. At first he was charming, polite, funny and attentive, but soon came arguments that flared and faded, periods of relative calm followed by chaos. Friends called it turbulent. It's worth mentioning that he wasn't the father of this baby, and by all accounts it seemed like she was actually moving on. But still, her gentle heart wanted to help him. Maybe she thought that she could fix what was broken. This worried her mother, Heidi. She checked in every day, just sensing that something wasn't right. But sadly, no amount of love would be able to stop what was coming. By early 2022, Lisa had now moved to Alton for a fresh start. A new home, a new life, a new beginning for her and her baby that was soon to be. But while Lisa was preparing for motherhood, DeAndre was unraveling. He'd been drifting between towns, Litchfield, Gillespie and Alton. He was angry, unstable and refusing medication. His family said that he was now hearing voices. One of these voices was a woman named Ruth, who apparently told him bad things. The family begged for help, but they were told that he could not be treated unless he posed a danger to him or to others. And it was that line in the sand, unless he's dangerous, that would haunt them and everyone involved forever. While Lisa folded baby clothes and planned for July, DeAndrea spiraled deeper and deeper into paranoia. He was stealing, muttering about people plotting against him, and cutting ties with everyone who tried to reach out. So what began as a fragile relationship was now a collision between hope and instability, and within just days, the worst would happen. The drive from Jerseyville to Alton is only about 30 minutes, a familiar stretch of Illinois highway, open sky, fields, the kind of road that gives you too much time to think. Mother Heidi knew it by heart. She'd made that drive dozens of times since Lisa had moved into a new apartment on Bolivar Street. It was supposed to all be a fresh start, a new, quieter neighborhood, but that morning the silence on the other end of her phone felt like a cry for help. Each unanswered text message, each call that went straight to voicemail, something inside the mother whispered, "Go, now." Meanwhile, around that small home, most neighbours said that they heard nothing unusual, just the quiet hum of mid-afternoon life. Some carried out chores, took out the trash or cut their lawn. However, at least one neighbour had heard screaming, followed by a silence, on the night that Lisa was last heard from. The noises that they'd heard were on the night of Wednesday the 8th of June, and, unknowingly, behind that front door, something terrible had already unfolded. Police would later piece together what had happened, helped massively by CCTV on Lisa's home, as well as in the surrounding area, and that night would end in a literal nightmare. And then the day after those screams were heard, at 12:59 p.m, police were called by Heidi. The worried mother had gone to see her daughter because by then she hadn't heard from her in 15 hours. Heidi parked outside, walked up the steps and knocked. There was no answer, so she tried again. Still nothing, so she opened up the front door. Shortly after entering, she found her daughter, the caring young woman, the woman who wanted to become a nurse, who was destined to become a mother, and in an instant, it became obvious she was gone.
911, what's the address of the Hi, listen. What's going on? My girlfriend's daughter is killed. Yeah. What's going on there?
Some other neighbours approached the front door, and the mother ran outside in shock. That's when she made the phone call. Within minutes, the scene was filled with officers, and even they, hardened by years on the job, struggled to process exactly what they found. One of them spoke into his radio, voice shaking. "It's bad. It's really bad." When first responders entered Lisa's apartment, the air was still. There was no forced entry, but there was Lisa, who had been brutally ended. Her mother was outside, sobbing. She was being comforted by neighbours who didn't know exactly what she'd seen. Officers secured the scene, walking carefully through the small home. They were looking for answers, who had done this, and also to understand why. And then came the discovery that would make the search for the perpetrator even more urgent. Because inside, they did find Lisa's body, and in this case, the word body was heartbreakingly literal. The head was not within the home. A scene like this does not seem real, not in a relatively quiet town like this, nor to the officers who knew Lisa as a smiling face around Alton. One investigator later said it was the most disturbing thing he'd seen in his entire career. But honestly, what would come next would push this case into a level that thankfully not many reach.
Just really sad that it happened.
April Wooten says Dodd was her next-door neighbor. In the couple months, Dodd had lived on Bolivar Street in Alton. Wooten says she seemed like a kind-hearted person.
I have a 3-year-old daughter, and I could not imagine anybody putting their hands on her in any type of way.
They began searching the surrounding property, aided by the local CCTV, as well as a statement from a local resident that had stumbled upon a serrated kitchen implement in that big red trash container. Very early on Thursday morning at 4 minutes past midnight, a man was seen leaving Lisa's home with a laundry basket. He then walked across the parking lot of a smoke shop, and in that location was an industrial-sized trash container. Nothing about it immediately stood out, except this bin held something unimaginable. Inside was Lisa's head. The man seen leaving her home had placed it there, just steps away from the home that she had turned into a nursery. The same home where days earlier she'd been washing and hanging tiny baby clothes, preparing herself for motherhood.
She was just a loving soul, just a beautiful soul, a beautiful smile. She had attended college and was planning on going into the medical field. I had just sent out invitations the prior Saturday for the baby shower. We were just excited and kind of gathering the items you need to have a baby. It's not something I wish on anybody. So, yeah, I'd rather not speak on that.
Oh, that Shelby Dodd could not talk to me in person. However, Dodd shared her love, her admiration for her sister, and her pain during a telephone interview.
She was just an amazing person. She was there for everybody.
Shelby Dodd says her little sis, 22-year-old Lisa Dodd, had a bubbly personality and a heart of gold.
Oh, a huge heart. I mean, whether it was people to animals to anything. She just wanted to spread love everywhere.
She says her sister was excited about starting a new chapter in her life. In March, Lisa moved into a new apartment in Alton, and late next month, she was due to have a baby girl.
Because it was going to be her first. She had a couple names picked out. She had so many clothes already and just so much stuff for the baby. And she was ready. That's the justice I want for Lisa, is her to be remembered as who she was. In a positive note. I should be able right now to just pick up the phone and call her. I just miss her.
Dodd's family plans to hold a funeral and a celebration of life for her next week.
Police Chief Marcus Pulido addressed the community through a video statement. She was savagely killed, he said, his voice almost breaking. She was decapitated by a freaking savage monster. Her unborn child was also killed as a result of this. He spoke not as a detached official, but as a father who was visibly shaken. He reminded the public that Lisa's family had been planning a baby shower. In fact, the invitations had just been mailed out. And now, instead of this celebration, they were planning a funeral. I will actually play you that video statement now, because it's not just a man with a job making a boring clinical statement. It really is very human and very powerful.
Last week, June 9th, at about 12:59 p.m., the Alton Police Department did respond to a residence in the 3400 block of Boulevard Street in reference to a possible homicide. What was observed, what was learned, what was found is absolutely terrible. Every murder is absolutely terrible. We'll never take that away. But what happened to 22-year-old Lisa Dodd, who had just moved to this place in Alton, is beyond irreprehensible. It's abominable. It is completely terrible what happened to her. What that monster was charged with today, about what she went through, can make some people just completely lost for words. That monster, that savage monster, has been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of intentional homicide of an unborn, dismembering a human body. I'll say that again. A human body, offenses relating to motor vehicles, and concealment of a homicidal death. She was savagely killed by a freaking savage monster. This daughter, this mother-to-be, and her family were in the planning stages of a baby shower that was supposed to be at the end of June. But instead, now the family is planning a funeral because of what a monster did. Irreprehensible. What a savage monster did to her. Her mother had to go through something that nobody should ever have to go through. First of all, no parent should ever have to bury their child. but her mother not heard from her in a little bit and wanted to go check on her to see if she was okay, and found her in a way that you.
By the evening of the discovery, detectives already had a suspect. In fact, Mother Heidi had even mentioned him on the initial 911 call. The suspect was DeAndrea Holloway, the on-again, off-again partner of Lisa. He was now nowhere to be found in Alton, but just 40 miles away in a different town, something strange had happened. In Gillespie, Illinois, police were investigating a simple case of theft, a stolen bicycle. They then spotted a man riding it down Western Street, and when they stopped him, he refused to give his name. He was agitated, muttering, and in fact, he was banging his head against the wall at the station. They booked the man in as a John Doe, and no one yet realized that the man in their custody was actually wanted for one of the most shocking crimes in state history. That realization would only come hours later, when his fingerprints were run through the system. The man sitting in the Gillespie police station, the one arrested for simply stealing a bicycle, was DeAndrea Holloway. He was the number one suspect. The small-town officers suddenly found themselves at the center of a national story. They called the Alton police force immediately. Within hours, Holloway was transferred into custody. And while he sat in a cell, silent and uncooperative, officers in Alton worked through the night, gathering evidence, documenting the scene, and preparing to tell a mother that the wheels of justice had already begun to turn. But as they'd soon all discover, justice would take a long, long time. When news of the arrest reached Alton, there was a wave of relief. But that relief was followed by something else, a deep feeling of confusion, because no one could make sense of why. DeAndrea Holloway wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a random intruder. He was someone that Lisa had known for years, someone that Lisa had tried to love, but someone who, according to his own parents, had begun unraveling a long time before the crime.
Hello, I am Chris Hawk. I am DeAndrea Holloway's stepdad. I never thought I would be recording a video like this. First of all, I want to offer my condolences to the Dodd family. I cannot imagine what you must be going through. I'm not going to deny that what happened was an extreme act of evil. It was. I don't know how else to explain it. It was an act of evil. I don't know if there's a word that describes it. And over here we are ashamed. His mom, his sister, we're all shocked. We knew he was capable of violence, but we never saw this. We've been trying to get help for him for at least 3 years. But as far as longer term mental care, we were always told that we can't hold them unless they've done something. And now he's being held because he's done something. Our system fails people with mental problems. I've grown up in an environment with mental problems. And people are kind of left on their own. It's a tragic situation. This is the D that we knew. They're old pictures, but they show that there's a human there. The human does exist. He's not a monster. What he did was savage. What he did was monstrous. He's not a monster.
When Alton police interviewed Holloway, he refused to answer any questions. However, he did keep saying that he just wanted to go to work. This must have been a bizarre exchange. Prosecutors went on to charge him with first-degree murder, intentional homicide of an unborn child, and concealment of a homicidal death. His bond was set at $2 million. But that was just the beginning of a long and painful legal road. Over the next 2 years, the case stalled repeatedly. Twice the defense raised questions about Holloway's mental fitness. He was ordered to undergo psychological evaluations, and at one point a judge ruled him unfit to stand trial. He was sent to a state mental institution, and whilst there, doctors worked to stabilise him. Months passed, and Lisa's family could only wait. They had no other choice. Every court date brought new delays, new uncertainties, and new heartbreak. Meanwhile, the legal landscape shifted once again. In 2023, the Illinois Supreme Court ruled that an unborn child could not be legally considered as a second murder victim for sentencing purposes. For Lisa's family, this was understandably another blow, a legal technicality that felt like a denial of baby Bean's existence. Still though, prosecutors pressed forwards. They were determined to hold Holloway accountable in some ways. By late 2024, Holloway was declared fit to stand trial. And then finally, a plea was entered. On December the 16th, 2024, DeAndrea Holloway pleaded guilty to all major charges: first-degree murder, intentional homicide of an unborn child, and concealment of a homicidal death. This guilty plea spared the family a full trial. There will be no cross-examinations, no reliving the details in open court, but it wouldn't completely spare their pain. During the hearing, prosecutors recounted facts, the timeline of the crime, the brutality, and the reason that the case had shaken the entire community. And then came the moment that no family can ever prepare for, the sentencing. On January the 17th, 2025, inside a quiet Madison County courtroom, Judge Neil Schroeder was ready to announce Holloway's punishment. The room fell silent. There was only the faint hum of the fluorescent lights, and the sound of a mother unfolding a piece of paper in shaking hands. Mother Heidi stood before the man who had taken her daughter's life. In front of her, a large screen showed a smiling photo of Lisa. Her belly was round with life, her hands resting gently on baby Bean. When Heidi began to speak, her voice was steady, but only barely. On that night, she said, "I received a life sentence. To live the remainder of my life without my beautiful, loving, sassy daughter. A life without knowing the joy of watching Lisa raise my granddaughter." Every word of her statement cut the room like broken glass. The defendant just sat still and silent, no tears or reaction. And amazingly, Heidi didn't speak with hatred. She spoke with sorrow, and something that almost sounded like grace. "I do not hate you," she told Holloway. "I am sad and disappointed in you. Sad that you thought your mental instability was a free pass from being held accountable for your crimes. Sad that you destroyed so many hopes and dreams, including your own." The courtroom stayed silent for a long time after that. When the mother eventually stepped down, several people wept quietly. Even the judge looked moved. And then came the official sentence: 60 years, 30 years for murder, 20 years for the homicide of the unborn child, 10 years for concealment, all to be served consecutively. This was a number that felt final, even though it could never bring Lisa or her baby back. Mother Heidi looked Holloway directly in the eyes. "You told me once," she said, "I hate being in jail. I hate being trapped. Well, now you have 60 years to hate being in prison." She paused, took a breath, and then said, "And I will pray you find redemption for your soul."
I would like to thank the many law enforcement agencies that collaborated on my daughter's case. A special thank you to Officer Limmersberg of the Alton Police Department for his excellent work on this case. I am forever grateful for your time and wisdom. Thank you to the Madison County State's Attorney's Office and Madison County Coroner's Office for handling this case with care. Thank you to Judge Schroeder for presiding over the case. Thank you, Tiffany Brooks, Victim Service Coordinator, for being with us through this whole journey. A huge thank you to Lauren Markle, if I said that right, and Crystal Yui for the tireless work on bringing resolution to this case with a guilty plea. A special thank you to Crystal for fielding all my questions and always welcoming me to attend the court proceedings. This allowed me a better understanding of the process. This is a tragic outcome of a 2-year on and off again domestic violence relationship. This didn't have to end this way. My daughter should be here raising her toddler instead of being a casualty of domestic violence. If you have a mental instability or mental illness, seek treatment and be consistent with your treatment. Understand that your condition or illness will not keep you from being held accountable for the crimes you commit. If you are in a domestic violence relationship, if someone is emotionally, mentally, or physically abusing you, make a safe plan to leave that relationship. If they continually disrespect your boundaries, make demeaning comments, and control your every movement, this is abuse. Find the resolve to leave that relationship. If someone threatens to end your life, believe them. If they can say it, think it, and talk about it, they can carry out the threat. Reach out to your local, regional, or national resources that are available to assist you in making a safe plan to leave. Your life depends on it. It isn't easy, and it may be one of the hardest things you do, but your life is important, and you are worthy and deserve a life free from abuse.
Sure. I just want to say that you don't often see the kind of strength that the family of Lisa has exhibited in this case. Incredible strength, incredible grace in the courtroom today with her statements to the defendant. Defendant who viciously took the life of her daughter and granddaughter, and who over years, as she said, had abused them, and is now going to face decades in prison for the crime of murder, or 2 lives, not just one, the mother and the unborn child. And I just want to commend the family to say that it's very inspirational to see the kind of strength that you've shown, and I'm sure that everyone in the courtroom experienced the same thing. I also want to thank Crystal Yui from the Appellate Prosecutor's Office for her help in this case, Lauren Miracle, who is our Chief of the Violent Crimes Unit, and Crystal were lead prosecutors on this case.
After the hearing, State's Attorney Tom Haynes spoke to reporters. This case has been difficult for everyone, he said. It has been traumatic for Lisa's family. With this resolution, they were spared the additional trauma of a trial. Our hope is that this conviction and sentence will be a step toward healing. He added something else too, something that echoed what Heidi had been saying for months. This was a tragic outcome of a 2-year, on and off again, DV relationship. It didn't have to end this way, and Mother Heidi agreed. She used the platform that she has but never wanted, the one born from her grief, to urge others to listen to the signs. If someone threatens to end your life, she said, believe them. Find the resolve to leave. My daughter should be here, raising her daughter.
And I just wish she would have known how loved she was. You know, that she wouldn't have ever been alone, that she could have gotten out of this relationship and had a full life.
The wider community rallied around her words. A GoFundMe created in Lisa's name raised nearly $16,000. Some of this went to funeral costs, but Heidi donated much of it, $5,000, to the Oasis Women's Centre, which helps DV survivors. She also donated $2,000 to the Riverbend Humane Society in honor of Lisa's lifelong love for animals. People across the country left messages with their donations. Survivors of horrific relationships wrote things like, I feel lucky to have made it out alive, and her story touched me so much. I wish I could have helped her. And Lisa's light, the same one that had shone so brightly in life, is now still touching people even though she's no longer here. As the cameras packed up and the courtroom emptied out, there was still one last lingering question. What could have saved her? There's a particular kind of reflective silence that follows tragedy. It's kind of like the calm after a devastating storm blows through town, leaving wreckage in its wake. The quiet street where Lisa lived went back to normal in the months after she passed. The police tape came down, the home was cleaned out, and the neighbours could start to heal. New tenants could now move into what was about to be a family home. But for those who knew her, and for anyone who's seen love turn dangerous, that street will never feel the same again. Because the story of Lisa Dodd isn't just about what was lost, it's about what could have been saved. It's about how small warnings, ignored or unseen, can lead to something unthinkable like this. Lisa's mother used to check in on her daughter every single day. She saw the red flags, but it seems she never imagined it could really get this bad. I mean, who would? And maybe that's the hardest part. because DV doesn't always look like in the movies. It can look like constant apologies. It can look like I'm fine. It can look like please give me one more chance, I'm going to change. And through the lens of coercive control, it looks like love. And it keeps on looking like love, right up until the moment of impact. When the sentence was handed down, 60 years, State's Attorney Tom Haynes said he believed Holloway would never see the light of day again. And maybe for some that does feel like justice. But for Heidi and everyone that loved Lisa, justice doesn't look like a prison cell. Justice would have been seeing her daughter cradle her newborn granddaughter. It would have been watching Lisa laugh throughout sleepless nights, learning how to become a mom on the job. It would have been hearing baby Bean's first cry, but instead, there's a grave instead of a crib. And yet even in that darkness, there is a strange kind of light that still breaks through. Because since Lisa's death, dozens of people have written to her family, women who say that her story gave them the courage to finally leave their own terrible and dangerous relationships. Some say that they called shelters, some say that they told a friend, and some say, she saved me. That doesn't make the pain smaller, but I guess it can add some meaning to a tragedy. Heidi once said that she wanted people to remember her daughter, not for how she met her end, but for how she lived her life. A big heart, a bright smile, a young mother that couldn't wait to meet her baby Bean. A girl who raised money for animals instead of asking for gifts for herself. A woman who wanted to heal others, even as she desperately needed healing herself. And today, devastatingly, there's no sound of baby laughter in that apartment. Only thoughts of what could have been, but never will. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.